listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Giveaway!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and join me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Battle Royale, the Japanese movie that I'm sure everyone's heard of at some point.
Yeah, not Casino Royale, but
Yeah, Battle Royale. It's the...
They take all the James Bonds, put them on an island.
yeah, they have to fight.
I'm Sean Connery.
Pew, pew, pew.
But watch if they were to do that, put all the Bonds on an island, George Lazenby wins, or Timothy Dalton. I mean, Timothy Dalton's been good in other stuff.
Hey, Timothy Dalton's awesome.
It's just that those Bond movies at the time were just kind of bland.
Yeah,
but Battle Royale. So it is essentially what inspired the Hunger Games. Although the Hunger Games authors are like, Battle Royale, never heard of it. It's like that's kind of impossible
because it's pretty much very, very, very similar.
And if you haven't seen Battle Royale, but you've watched Kill Bill Volume 1, one of the actresses from Battle Royale is in Kill Bill Volume 1.
Go Yubari, well, the character name from Kill Bill.
So, there's parts of like that have been woven into American pop culture. So even if you haven't seen Battle Royale, you've seen the concept.
Yeah.
But
And then PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, which is a Battle Royale game where 100 people get thrown on an island. And then it's the last one, which is like the biggest gaming phenomenon this past year.
Yeah, so it's a movie that, not necessarily horror, it's just really heavy genre. And there's a lot of gore in it. And whereas the Hunger Games is more PG-13, this has like blood spray.
Well,
blood
and
spray.
I think there's horror in the element of the situations. It's not scary horror. It's just horrifying.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, like Hunger Games books, though, those are much gorier than the movie for, that usually it works. But Battle Royale is one of those interesting things where it's like, I want to see like Disney do that, but do that. Like just have kids getting,
I thought you were going to say with Disney characters on an island.
I would watch that too. Like
the Kingdom Hearts of Battle Royale.
Yeah.
It's like we got Pocahontas.
No, I want to
versus,
see like High School Musical versus like whatever.
Okay,
else. Winner takes all. Death match. But then they would never do that.
Yeah, but Battle Royale is what we're talking about. But before we do that, I guess we can go through recent things we've been watching. If there's anything we want to recommend.
Yeah, because this podcast is on essentially like a week delay.
Yeah.
Recording back to back. So if there's recent news that's a bombshell, sorry if we missed it.
Yeah.
So what have you been watching lately, William?
Trying to so I did
28 Weeks Later?
I watched 28 Weeks Later again, which if you haven't rewatched that, so the Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, which was also written by Alex Garland, who's directed stuff like Ex Machina and has that new movie Annihilation that's coming out.
I did not realize he directed 28 Weeks Later.
Or he
Wrote it?
Yeah, so Danny Boyle directed, Alex Garland wrote.
Okay. Danny Boyle, he did 28 Weeks Later also?
No, he did not.
Okay, I didn't think so.
So the director that did 28 Weeks Later was, I think at one point, rumored to be the one who's going to direct the BioShock movie, and then that kept shifting around, and Gore Verbinski's supposed to do it, and then it just died. But, so 28 Weeks Later, it had, for 2007, it had Idris Elba, Jeremy Renner, Rose Byrne, and I'd forgotten about the fact that they were in it, and it's like, then I went back and rewatched it because I watched it when it came out. I haven't really watched it since. I mean, it was an enjoyable movie. But, in terms of like zombie movies or infected movies, it has like some of the larger scale scenes that have happened in a lot of those types of movies. Even the American movies that have had relatively decent budgets seem like they didn't have as much going on. In
World War Z did, but
World War Z was. I think South Park had an effective description where it's essentially Brad Pitt has a really cool scarf and he's on planes and they crash and he lives.
So essentially every Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah, but just like 20 Weeks Later is something that I hadn't really watched in a while, and it still is entertaining. It's still good. There's really no. Like, there is some effects work because they're blowing up, like, parts of London.
Is that the helicopter scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are cool set pieces in it, and there are cool moments, and, I thought it was an effective enough follow-up. The music in it I liked because it's kind of the creepy instrumental guitar music versus, like, synth or orchestral score. So that was, just different. So that was something I hadn't watched in a while, and I did watch. It makes me want to go back and watch 28 Days Later now too. Even though I'd watched that one multiple times, I saw that in theaters. But yeah, that was a movie that was interesting to give another watch to. So something I'd recommend checking those movies out again if you haven't, because I'm kind of zombied out.
Yeah,
at
I
this
think
point.
those came at the right time. Both. I mean, I liked both of those films a lot. I didn't know how 28 Weeks Later was going to fare, but I ended up really liking it. But I remember when 28 Days Later was coming out. You know, this came out right around the time of Shaun of the Dead in America, I think.
Because like in 2003 and 4, like between that era, you had 28 Days Later, Dawn of the Dead remake, and Shaun of the Dead. So those three movies revitalized the
those
zombie
are kind of like
genre.
the precursor to the zombie floodgates opening up and just
I remember before 28 Days Later came out, there was a decent market push for that. I think
I remember it.
Like we would go to the movies like all the time after work on the weekends when I worked at like Mike Lenning's, we were like basically every Friday or Saturday night we would go to the movies afterwards. So I remember like all the standees. And one of my best friends at work there at the time, who I just met through there, he had got a tattoo like maybe 6 months prior to the marketing coming out, and it was the Biohazard symbol. Yeah. And then when that marketing push happened, everybody said, "Oh, you got a 28 Days Later tattoo," and it pissed him off so bad.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen the movie yet?
The one thing I think I remember the most from the 28 Days Later, like the trailers and stuff when I was younger, is there's apparently scene in one of the houses toward the end, I guess, from the soldiers. Anyway, you see like the red eyes or something. And I always remember that scene. Like, if anything, that's like the most memorable thing to me about that movie. Because I just remember that being in the trailers a lot, and that's just kind of like the we always have the Lethal Weapon, like flame guy, like that. Just those things always remind me. Like when I think of 28 Days Later, that's what I think.
Yeah, I remember from that first film because I don't know if I've watched it probably once or twice since I saw it in theaters. But I remember the drop of like blood or whatever coming down into the eye, because that was a great moment of tension, and you know what I mean. Like again, that's like just great little storytelling right there. Like
two, like 20 Days Later, so you kind of have a mixture of like Night of the Living Dead and then Day of the Dead, in that you kind of have like out in the country, out in areas with like a small group of characters. And then you also have like military people that have been, holed up in a location for a long period of time. So you have kind of like those two things. I think for a lot of people, 20 Days Later kind of had a weaker third act than the first and second act. But that's inherent in most horror films.
Well, to be honest, in most movies, the third act generally falls off the most.
And that's the most divisive part of it too.
Because like even with like as much as I love Resident Evil 7, the third act, in my opinion.
The game.
The game.
Not the movie.
Not the movie. The Resident Evil 7, the game, like the first two acts are amazing. Yeah. The third act would, in any other game, would be okay, but compared to what I got originally, it's bad. So I think there is a lot of times, and regardless what type of movie you do, the third act's kind of always...
it's just the most problematic part of the movie to try and wrap up.
Because you have to end it,
Yeah, but... Yeah, so I watched that. I'm trying to think of other stuff. I did finish up season 3 of Mr. Robot. I watched that.
Robot.
I heard there was. I kept meaning to ask you if you'd watched it at the time when I was hearing about. Isn't there like one episode with like seemingly a single take or something? I remember hearing buzz about it. I don't know if it was this season or last, but I remember hearing there was like one episode that was really impressive. Apparently,
I mean, there were some like really impressive. Like I think there were some impressive like one take sequences, and then the show has a lot of really striking cinematography. Because I saw the other day like one of those filmmaking groups that I follow on Facebook where somebody was like breaking down like a grid showing like the rule of thirds in different shows and movies, and then somebody said, well, do Mr. Robot, because Mr. Robot will have scenes where there's like a character like in the bottom left of the screen with a ton of negative space around them. So they're like in the bottom corner of the frame. The rest of it's like a huge wide open like coffee house and stuff.
Isn't like Val Kilmer like a hacker or something in there?
No, they're Christian Slater's in it.
They're the same person. They're the same. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Speaking of which, that Heather's.
Heather's going to be a TV show.
Which I did not think that looked good. I always reserve my judgment on remakes and stuff. But
wasn't the trailer for that basically insinuating that the bullies were the geeks and the outcast, and they were the Heathers, when the Heathers should have been like the popular kids?
That's what they were talking about doing for that Revenge of the Nerds remake, was making the nerds, because now like
Nerd culture is popular.
Yeah, or they have the money and power. They were talking about reversing the roles.
Saying you're a nerd and saying oh, I'm such a nerd, and you have a pair of Stance Wolverine socks on. I'm a nerd. It's no, it's kind of what the cool people wear.
Yeah, William.
Yeah. But the real nerds are hey, how you doing, milady? And they have a little Fender hat on and
fedora hat.
Yeah, fedora. But they have a Fender fedora hat on.
No, somebody walks up with. I need to find this one video because it's hilarious. There's a video in a park and some douchey muscular bro dude is harassing a girl, and then some kind of heavier dude with a neck beard and a fedora comes up with his cane and knocks the guy on his knee and does something so that the guy goes away, and then she's like, thank you so much, and he's like, no problem, my lady, and he tips his fedora to her, and then they start making out, and it's that is the wet dream of some people.
Yeah, but it's just
directed by William Capps. Yeah. Sorry, William Capps.
Hey, my beard does not go down my neck.
But the way that people, this is kind of the problem with the Big Bang Theory is the nerd stuff is you wear a comic book T-shirt and you have a pair of Vans on or Chucks, and it's
people like to co-opt a lot of things whenever it seems it's popular to brand their own identity.
Oh, and they're also bringing back Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but it's going to be the evil version. So
hey, I mean that Riverdale show is not too bad. Are the same people involved or not?
This is for Netflix.
Yes.
Yeah, I know they are.
I have no idea
because I think that Sabrina was on the most recent series of Riverdale. She had a cameo because it's all Archie stuff.
Wait a minute, Melissa Joan Hart Sabrina, or the girl that's going to play the?
I don't know if it's the girl, but the character Sabrina,
because the
Teenage
girl,
Witch, was apparently
the actress that's going
to
play Sabrina is Kiernan Shipka. Her pronounced name. She was on Mad Men, is how I remember.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So she was really good on Mad Men as Sally Draper, and she was in that movie Blackcoat's Daughter.
Yeah. And apparently, I did not know this because I just thought I was young that Sabrina the Teenage Witch was just a sitcom. But apparently it's based off a comic.
Yeah, that's
I didn't know.
Stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was just Melissa Joan Hart.
Yeah,
whatever.
Mr. claiming to read comics over here. Didn't know.
Yeah, where's your Archie lore?
I don't read Archie.
Nerd.
I was up on the Archie stuff because I read the Ninja Turtles Archie series. Archie comics.
Yeah. Archie also fought Predator.
Archie wasn't in it, but the Archie brand.
Yeah, the brand.
They had a series of Ninja Turtle comics that was different from the Mirage ones. And those are the ones that were sold in Kroger's. Yeah. So I got all those, but in the back of it, there would always be a page or two of an Archie little comic or Sabrina or something like that. So I was always up on Archie a little bit and Sabrina and that whole brand.
It's just funny to see how much stuff has ties back to, comics and stuff. But it just but I know this all started from the Heathers thing. It's if the original formula worked, because I know Scream Queens definitely played off of the Heathers, especially the first season. But it's sometimes just kind of do that formula, because when you do it the other way around, I don't.
Well, sometimes it seems I get subverting it, but sometimes it seems like they do it the other way around, just to be okay, this is how we're going to make it different, when it's not necessarily better. You know what I mean? Just make a good film, whichever. Even if you could tweak it a little bit or a lot, whatever, or do the same thing.
Cool, they're the nerds, or instead of being the nerds, it's that you didn't do anything. You just to me that's just kind of lazy.
So
and then there's a seemingly gay guy called Heather too. That they call Heather, which is it seems like they want to, have more diversity in there, but it's I don't know any guys named Heather though.
Yeah.
Is that
to me too? That's also they're kind of if it's genuine, great. But if you're just forcing something in there to look how diverse we are.
It seems like it's a little forced when they're all supposed to be called Heather, and then you're calling this guy Heather. Yeah. And maybe they justify it, but
maybe it'll work more organically. But to me, I don't.
Maybe it was a non-binary, non-gender specific.
I mean, Heather's I think
kid.
Yeah, but I think Heather's a gender-specific name traditionally,
Yeah, probably, but not in 2000. We're in 2018. Not 2018.
It's been reclaimed.
Anything goes, brother.
So, anyone else watch anything?
Out of morbid curiosity, I did watch some of Raw 25, which is reference to WWE, Monday Night Raw 25. And there was some interesting stuff.
Oh, it was a documentary or something?
No, it was just they literally had the 25th anniversary show of
Monday so you Raw. Watch Monday Night Football or
Monday
Night
Raw, yeah. And it, just I was okay, because they had all the past stars on there. William can deny he used to watch wrestling and make fan fiction wrestling. But anyway, it was okay. I mean, you had a Stone Cold Son McMahon, and it's just but now I don't watch wrestling.
So Vince McMahon,
XFL.
He had brought back the XFL, But I just saw this morning where people were sharing stories about allegations that are coming up against him in relation to the type of Me Too movement.
I mean, does that not surprise anybody? That man is like sexually harassed and used women as pawns and objects for more than I've been alive. So it's like that. That's like, you know, yeah, of course he did. He's a scumbag, you know.
Allegedly.
If you go and like
legally covering our bases.
I mean, no,
allegedly.
There's no alleged to that, man. Like, you go look at what they did. You go watch anything in the wrestling that like covered the 80s, 90s. Like, there was just some terrible shit that those women went through, you know.
So there's
wrestling. But yeah, it was just interesting to watch that and seeing who all they got to come back, and it would just I didn't watch the entire thing. I just only cared to watch like the retro guys. But I know why I don't watch anymore. It's just very, very, very difficult to even watch for more than like 2 minutes.
I always hear like some of the podcasts I listen to, which normally are gaming podcasts. Somehow wrestling gets brought up a lot. So a lot of times I get informed on I guess the feeling in the room of wrestling right now and wrestling culture and some things that are going on. You know, like I have a little bit of a pulse on it just from hearing other things, but I never watched it a lot. Like I watched it occasionally. Like I liked Hulk Hogan, like, but more I like the brand. You know what I mean? Like I would watch Suburban Commando and and what was the Tropic? What was the one where he had the boat?
I don't remember.
I know what you're talking about.
And there's the one where he's riding the motorcycle and somebody throws a dog in the ocean.
Yeah.
Like sad. Hopefully the dog's okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in the background of the shot. Yeah. So I liked, you know, things around wrestling, and I watched it a little bit occasionally, but I played some wrestling video games and stuff.
And then just what we've been watching, this is just real quick, they released a trailer for Rampage. And
the Rock movie.
Yeah, the Rock movie.
Based on the video game.
Based on the, 80s, 90s, Smash 'em Up arcade
80s.
game.
Yeah.
You know, that movie, and this is something we kind of discussed about just on our own, like, I think the potential is definitely there for that movie to be better than Kong Skull Island for one reason, is because The Rock is
charismatic.
He is much better than Tom Hiddleston, however you say his name. Like, if you gave me, you got a Rock movie, or if you gave me a general just summer action movie, I would much rather watch one with The Rock than Loki. Like I think that he's probably
nothing
overall,
against what he did. It's just that the Rock is
charismatic.
So
it's a little bit like Adrian Brody and Predators.
Yeah,
you know,
I don't want to watch that. I want to watch.
Not saying he's
Adrian Brody's a good actor.
Well, I'm not saying like he was that wrong for it. Like Adrian Brody didn't work in Predators that much. He was fine in Kong, but yeah, you didn't go there to see Tom Hiddleston.
No, you went
there to see It was like Kong Skull Island was a ensemble cast.
Movie. Like,
you had John Goodman, you had Samuel L. Jackson, Shea Wiggum, who's been in a bunch of stuff. But as opposed to, it looks like Rampage is kind of the Rock's show, where he'll be front and center throughout it. Which
to me, this is going to be really interesting to see if that movie, because Jumanji was like a kind of a secret, like a surprising success, because it's probably going to almost hit $1 billion. It could before its run's over. Nobody thought
surprisingly giving Star Wars way more competition than
anybody ever thought was possible. So I wonder if coming off of that, if Rampage, which is mainly looks like it's going to be the Rock show, could get anywhere near that, because you got people are going to watch it regardless of whatever because of the ties to the video game, because everybody likes Rampage.
Well, does everybody like Rampage because
nostalgia? They like the nostalgia.
Yeah, but like 15-year-olds, they don't know what Rampage is.
People like us, you know, like
but still, like it doesn't. I don't know. They gave no indication in that it seemed like anything like Rampage. Like they just wanted like a monster movie and had a brand because I don't know. They didn't sell up the characters turning into the monsters and all that stuff.
That's my biggest issue. Yeah, like I would have liked.
Well, it looks like they wanted to go. They were okay having campy huge animals fighting huge animals, but they didn't want to go all the way.
Yeah. Which to me, it's like in this day and age, you can go all the way on stuff. But
But then if they had like Jack Black and John C. Reilly and somebody else be the monster,
that would be awesome.
And then there was always the female that was she the lizard? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, Lizzie or something.
Yeah, I just think it'd be really interesting. This movie does just from a box office perspective because of the success that Jumanji had, which nobody saw that it being that successful.
When is that hitting?
Like in April. So I think
they've been pushing that film for a while.
Yeah, so
too.
I think that when it comes out, like to me, it'd be really interesting to see if The Rock can, because Jumanji was an ensemble cast. So and he's had a couple movies where he did it himself. and you know they weren't. So I guess some of them were flops. So it'd be interesting to see if this is
like
gonna do what Jumanji did, or
San Diego or San Fernando Valley,
San Andreas,
San Andreas, and there's been some other things that he was the lead of that did well, but yeah, we'll have to see how that turns out here before.
Surprised The Rock is a big star.
Yeah. Who would have thought that coming off the Scorpion King, you know, of what, 16 years ago? You know,
or back when he was Rocky Maivia on wrestling.
Yeah.
And they pretended he was Italian.
I watched Central Intelligence with him. I enjoyed it.
Oh, with Kevin Hart?
Yeah.
The thing is, like, The Rock is an enjoyable person to watch on do stuff because he's a great entertainer. It's just funny to see that he can lead a movie almost. Because the Fast and Furious movies are just kind of like, they were going to make that money. They were going to make that money anyway. You know, so, but the Jumanji doing
he doesn't need the Fast and Furious like Tyrese needs Fast and Furious.
No, he's proven. That's why Tyrese got so mad about it. It's like, Tyrese, you're not The Rock.
And
you know.
Fast and Furious didn't make The Rock. You know what I mean? It's not like he owes anything to that franchise.
No,
he stepped his foot in,
you
know, had some fun, and if he's going to do another thing, oh well.
Yeah, Vin Diesel needs Fast and Furious. The Rock does not need Fast and Furious.
So, Sean, did you watch anything?
Real quick, watch Devilman Crybaby. I don't watch a ton of anime, but it's an anime series on Netflix. I heard everybody talking about how crazy it is. It is very crazy. If this was a live action film or a live action show, it would be pretty wild to watch because there's a lot of mature stuff, I'll say. Like it almost seems like part of it is about, I guess it's based on an old manga or anime series, but this is like another storyline and kind of, it's like the Devilman is like a character, but I feel like this is like a different telling, or I'm not for sure exactly. I don't know the lineage, but it seems almost like about like a coming of age or I guess hitting puberty maybe. I don't know, like kind of growing up and being exposed to other things in the world maybe. But basically it's about a dude who's half devil, half person. But the way this sometimes gets triggered in the world,
Little Nicky,
possibly is by, I guess, I don't say dark desires, but people letting their desires go wild. Like essentially, I think in the opening episode, they go into this club that is basically like this big sex club where everybody's having a huge orgy and there is just everybody naked everywhere and doing drugs and all this stuff. And because they're all coked up and everything like that, like brings them out. So it's kind of about that in some ways. And it's like, the series feels like, I think it's like 10 episodes and they're like a half hour each or 22 minutes. So it's a pretty quick watch, but it almost feels like it should have been a little bit bigger because things are very different. Like it's like a lot of Japanese, I guess, entertainment in that it's set around a school of school kids. You know, like there's a lot of games that are RPG games that are based on like Persona and stuff like that. Or just you thumb through Netflix and you see so many that looks like they're set in schools.
Yeah,
so it's set in schools, but also, I really like that element of it. Like I don't know, I think that's some of the strongest parts, just seeing the kids and relationships, and the kids are talking about sex and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like it is very much about adolescence, coming of age. But then like by the end of the series, it is totally done like a 180 on kind of, I don't want to say the setting, but the situation everybody's in and stuff. And it's very expansive. It should have maybe been a little bit longer, but I really kind of enjoyed it. Like it was a good watch. I'd recommend it if you're just kind of itching for some anime and you want to see some crazy stuff. I really like the animation style. It's a little loose. It feels like maybe if you're used to American animation or stuff, it feels like something maybe from the 70s, like Heavy Metal or something like that, where it feels a little sloppy at the times, but it gives it style and personality. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then other than that, I watched A Stupid and Futile Gesture on the National Lampoon magazine, the creation of that Will Forte, directed by David Wayne. It's, it starts off, it feels a little cheap at times when the film starts, and it's like, okay, this seems like a little low budget and a little maybe low brow at times. But once the film starts to get going, I really enjoyed it. And I would watch that film again for sure. I always love seeing stories about, magazines or just different characters in history, especially ones in entertainment. And basically it's kind of a little bit like a biopic on him, but it is a comedy film first almost. But it's got a great cast. It's some odd casting, but it's intentional, and they bring it up. Like Chevy Chase is played by... what is his name?
Oh, Joe McHale.
Joe McHale. and there's just like tons and tons of people in it, and it's pretty funny, but it's just interesting to see National Lampoons and kind of how that started. And then the only other thing I watched was Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson film. I'd bought that a while back for like $5. I'll just say highly recommended. I don't have to get into that film, but finally got around to watching it because, as I mentioned last time, I really want to see the Phantom Thread. And since I can't make the theaters, I was like, okay, I'll watch this other Paul Thomas Anderson film I haven't seen yet. So yeah, that's about it that I can think of.
All right, so I guess we move into our discussion of Battle Royale. And I guess too, like, so this is on Netflix. You can go check it out if you want to. It's on there, and you can get it, you purchase on disc or whatever. So I guess we'll do full spoilers throughout because this one you really kind of have to discuss the conceit of the movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of like similar to Mom and Dad, like giving you a description of the movie in itself
doesn't replicate the experience.
It doesn't replicate, but it's still a spoiler because it's like kids killing kids. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
well, and two, so it's from 2000. There was the based on a novel from like the prior year, 1999, and came out like I said 2000. And so basically, according to IMDb, the plot summary is in the future, the Japanese government captures a class of 9th grade students and forces them to kill each other under the Revolutionary Battle Royale Act. And I think there's some differences between the book and the movie and things like that, because I was reading the comparison of between like the Hunger Games and Battle Royale franchises or the movies and the books. But, they choose a random class that they will send to this island where everyone in the class has to kill each other until only one person is left, because they put these collars on everyone's neck that have explosives in them. And if by the end of the 3-day period, once the Battle Royale starts, if everyone isn't dead except for one person, so there can only be one survivor, if that's not the case, they'll detonate the charges in everybody's collar and kill everyone. And in the opening scene, it's their former, gym teacher that is explaining the rules to it. Takashi
Kitano, or Beat Takashi. Yeah. Yes. Director, actor, comedian, all that stuff.
So he's the teacher that tells them the rules. And in that sequence, there is a bit of gore. Like, he throws a knife in somebody's head, and they show how the collars work and blow out somebody's throat. And so you get to see a lot of gore up front, and this is not going to be like sanitized PG-13 gore. This is old school, like
over the
blood
top.
spraying everywhere gore, and all the students. There's initially 40 students, but then 2 of them get killed early on. And then I think that the basic premise is that in the future, kids are very disrespectful and they don't believe or trust adults. So in school, they're acting up because there's like an early scene where one of the characters has like a switchblade or a butterfly knife or something, where he runs by and like slices on the leg of one of the teachers.
I think it's Beat Takashi. He does.
So pretty much they're describing kids now.
So it's just kids that are very unruly and disrespectful. So the Battle Royale is to teach all of them a lesson that they need to behave, and to try to get them under control, essentially, in the movie. And on the island, they had the 40 students, and like 2 of them get killed early, and they give all of them a pack that has like food and water and theoretically a weapon. And there is a vast disparity between what's in those bags, because some kids get like Uzi or Tech-9s or assault rifles, and then one character gets a pot lid, and somebody gets binoculars. So it's either stuff that's completely useless or stuff that is very deadly. And then you just kind of see the dynamic that occurs, because too, like a difference between like the Hunger Games where people volunteer or are groomed from areas or whatever. In this, they're just a random class is chosen, people who are friends. So there is a dynamic of everybody knows everybody going into it.
Which I think makes it much more suspenseful and darker. It's not even that they're school kids. Like, these kids essentially have grown up together also.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They got kill your buddy.
Yeah, like they've grown up together since grade school.
So it's one of those great, because like something that a lot of movies do that's like a great feeling that just makes it live beyond just the running time is, does it make you think about your reaction in the same situation? And I think that this movie evokes that far more than the Hunger Games. Because, randomly choosing a person out of a district unless someone volunteers seems like, that's a grander idea that's not as easy to connect to as, well, holy shit, when I was in 9th grade, if they took our entire class, dropped us on an island, said everyone kill everyone until only one person lives, like that's a more that scenario is more visceral and
unsettling because it's you know.
But I think too, the one thing that the Hunger Games plays well on is that it's more of a social commentary because like the cards are already like the deck is stacked.
Yeah,
you know, like the people from the better areas will always kill out the people from the they were bred for that.
They're trained their entire life. They volunteer.
Yeah. So that one plays more on the social element, whereas this one plays more on like the. This one I think it does work a little bit better because it is kind of it makes you think more because it's like. It feels a little more centered in reality because it's not like a made up world. It is obviously you can maybe set in the future, but it just kind of like what would you do in that situation?
Well, and two, the technology used isn't that far fetched. It's relatively believable. It's not. You have like
an entirely new United States of America, and you have
like a big dome that's like a force field over stuff. Like you don't have that. No. You just have more believable technology and two, the idea that the different kids come out and, okay, so are they going to try to team up with their friends and try to survive? And then you do have a couple different directions. You have like the main character, it's kind of tough for me to keep because they called the main character different names. Yeah. So it was like Nanahara and Shiyu, if I'm pronouncing those terribly wrong. But you kind of have like him and then his classmate, which I'm going to butcher all these names in advance, so I apologize. Noriko. So those two are kind of like off, and they run into the other guy that's been in the Battle Royale before and has come back. And then you have the classmates who are kind of the computer whizzes who are trying to hack into the system to end the game and get out without having to kill anybody. So you have like that dynamic. You have like the female group that are like the friend group that are sticking together and seemingly haven't killed anyone. And then you have like the volunteer who's just going buck wild and killing everybody for fun. So then you have, other assorted groups where people do try to kill or people went crazy or something like that. So you have like different factions, and then you have like Chigusa, or how you pronounce it, who is also in Kill Bill.
Gogo Yubari.
Yeah, so you have like, at least one recognizable face if you watch like Kill Bill and stuff like that and other things.
And Takashi Kitano has been in a ton of stuff, and he's he was in Ghost in the Shell recently. Live action. He was awesome in that.
Yeah. That's where I recognize him.
Yeah.
So
he's huge in Japan.
Yeah.
So you have like the interesting element of the factions that break out. Like and you have 3 days, and supposedly at the end of the 3 days, everybody will die if everyone isn't dead except for one person. So you have the added element of the kids trying to beat the system, and then the kids that are just trying to kill everybody themselves. And I think that adds an interesting dynamic to it because like on the Hunger Games, you had that to a small extent of like people kind of teaming up a little bit until the end and they turn on each other. And, Battle Royale has a scene with the female group that almost feels something out of like a Tarantino crime film when somebody accidentally poisons the wrong person and then guns get drawn and everybody gets killed.
Yeah.
Except for one person.
Well, that's why I think this movie is going to... One thing I do like about this, too, and I think, being that this came out in 2000, I do think this was definitely ahead of its time for an American standpoint. I don't know if an American film would go the way this did with high schoolers.
No, I mean, in fact, because I was looking up, so I remember... Like probably, I had only watched half this film before. Yeah. And honestly, watching again too, the middle point is when it kind of starts to lose me a little bit. I think the beginning is like phenomenal and the end's really good too. But I think in the middle of it, you start to become a little desensitized to it. Like it's not as impactful when people are dying.
Once you start to see over 20 kids die.
Yes, But so the first time I'd watched it, I kind of dropped off in the middle and for some reason just had never got back to it. And I remember I downloaded it on a torrent, and I remember thinking, why didn't I just go to Wild and Woolly? Well, I got looking. It just now came out in America in 2011. It didn't get official release, and I probably downloaded this in like 2005 or 6, So, definitely not going to go where American film is. In fact, it didn't get a proper release because so many distributors were afraid to release it because of school shootings and stuff like that.
Which makes sense, because that happens here. We just had one that happened local. It happens a lot. So,
in our state.
But also always make sure you buy stuff.
But, I understand from that view, but it's also kind of like you have stuff, we've kind of picked Hunger Games to talk about because it is pretty much, regardless of what the author says, it is heavily derived.
It's so incredibly similar. You'd have to, like the idea that you force kids to kill each other. I mean, that idea has been talked about before.
I only saw the first Hunger Games. I didn't read the books, but it just felt very it felt a little very sanitized compared to this. When this really ratchets up the tension. Like I think the opening scene in the classroom is so good when they're not the opening scene, but the scene when they're describing the
introductory
setup,
scene,
introductory to the plan, because it's also the reaction of all the students. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing their fear and how frantic and scared and confused they are.
There's the denial stage where it's like, oh, this isn't really happening. This can't be true. Then there's the rebellion stage, like you can't make us do this. And then there's the one kid who asks, he's like, so if I'm the one that lives, I get to go home. And they said yes.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, well, somebody's already game planning, accepted this.
Yeah,
the director too.
He's a legendary director,
Kenji Fukasaku, I guess.
Yeah,
he was like 70 when he directed this, which is I didn't never realize that.
Yeah, so saving like a pretty big production. Yeah, I mean, like
imagine if Ridley Scott had directed this film last year.
Yeah, or like David Lynch.
Yeah, like in 2000. Like, this film is very. It doesn't,
It doesn't feel like a end of the road like half effort from anyone. This feels like full.
It doesn't feel neutered, is what I was going to say. Like it doesn't feel like they held anything.
I'm
back.
glad you said that because our last podcast we talked about Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad feels neutered.
Yeah,
and you watch something like this, and now this probably had a bigger budget. I don't know what the budgets were, but it just
in the places they were willing to go to.
Yeah, but this one,
regardless of budget,
this one was just like we're doing it all the way. It's kind of like the beginning scene from It, because that set the tone for that movie.
Yeah.
How are they going to handle this? And from the beginning, they went after it. Whereas this movie, they had the joke version too, which is funny that it even exists. But like, have you seen that?
Yeah.
Which is just funny that that's even a deleted scene.
Okay, bye.
And it's like, all right, movie's over. But that's why I like these movies, because I feel like a lot of times foreign films will go there, and they don't have the apprehension that a lot of American films do. And I think American films are getting better about that.
Well, I mean, there's always been like American film that did not feel the need to conform to a standard resolution of the story. I mean, like Battle Royale.
Those movies usually aren't good though, because that movie's like, I'm gonna be
nihilistic
honestly,
for the point of being nihilistic.
I'm thinking about stuff, a lot of stuff from that era that I watched. Like this kind of. Although I watched half this film way back when, but like I really got into some Japanese cinema like in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it made me, think of stuff like Audition and then Ichi the Killer. Like there's a lot of those films that just kind of went there and did not hold anything back.
And I think
the closest person here is like Eli Roth I can think of, but you know what I mean? Like as far as he tries to push the envelope, but it doesn't.
But but again, kind of like you said, almost in a more neutered way.
Well, yeah, I mean, like here people do at times push the envelope, but it feels like a lot of times they're doing it just to get a reaction out of people.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of like of recent things I've watched where it feels like where the ending was just so nihilistic. Like independent film has always done that, but like in terms of like big budget things, like this one, like I don't feel like the ending to it was like super unsafe or harsh.
No,
I feel
it felt a little safer than the rest of the film.
Yeah, I was gonna say
what was the American? I mean, I'd say American movie. What was the movie they had? Had they Justin Timberlake was in it? It was like an Island of Clones. And
The Island.
Is it The Island?
No, the one that had Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
I feel like that movie is like, I had to go back and watch it, but that is like kind of one of those endings where it's like, you're not going to go all the way with it.
I never saw it. Who directed that, William?
I think it was Michael Bay.
Because that was a movie that when I was in high school or maybe middle school came on all the time on FX. Like that was the movie that FX was sticking to, and they just played the hell out of it.
But going back to
2005 is in high school.
Battle Royale.
That's probably HBO then.
Like the idea that you put all these kids on this island and you have them with various types of weapons. Like it is interesting. You see the kind of arc of characters, and you see the character, like the one female character who starts killing her female classmates and stuff. And you see her progression, and then you see her downfall. And you see, like, for a lot of the characters, it starts giving you a little bit of the background on them as you see more about what's going on. And I did like that approach, because if you gave all the backstory up front, that's way too much information.
Yeah.
It's just you kind of thin the herd out a little bit and show, like, the major players in the story, and then you give a little bit of background.
Yeah, you give background for every single character. Like you said, then you would have either a movie that was too long on the boring stuff, and then when it came to all the action, it was kind of like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where everything happens at the very end, and then you get to have a really boring large part of a movie.
Yeah, I think like the opening, like up until the flashbacks, I think work well. But like, yeah, they do really do a good job at ratcheting up the tension until things start to maybe, I don't say slow down, but you become a little desensitized, and then they take a step back and then start show you some of the backstories and start to kind of try to let you dive into the characters a little bit more, which I think is...
Well, until you have the element of, once you get to a middle point and you have a pretty decent number of deaths that occurred, there's like a little bit of a lull where nothing really happens, and you have more like, place setting, like putting people in place and setting up the different groups that'll work together or against each other. And then you have like the guy running it then iterates like, okay, there's more danger zones, we're, increasing it, and then it forces people back into action and kind of forces the third act into place. Forcing everyone. And two, there's like having a finite timeline says like there's only so long this can go on. Everybody has to die. So that does let you know that there is tension.
Well, that's the only one thing I like a little bit better in Hunger Games. I forgot the exact timeline, but this was 3 days. I think the Hunger Games was like a couple of weeks. So I feel like the reason why this works better in this instance is because it was kind of like a melee free-for-all. You have a larger amount of people. But like with the Hunger Games, like it was more story driven, so the longer time span worked out better.
Well, and two, the Hunger Games, you kind of focused on less people because there weren't as many characters. Yeah,
you only have like 12. I can't remember. You only have so
the
many
Hunger
districts.
Games. It's like I know some people were trained more than betters, but it's just great that these are normal kids.
Yeah, these are normal.
You know what
kids
I mean?
And then the only one that may be at an inherent advantage, the volunteer, who could be like a possible serial killer, murderer, or something,
or a plant too, like somebody that's just like the
that they put in to make sure it stays interesting, to make sure that everybody kills each other.
Which would be, the one thing be interesting that happened if he was like the ringer and they killed him first, and then it's just,
so you have like those interesting elements, and then like the guy that was the prior participant or the prior winner, having him involved does add another layer. And a difference too is this was you really only saw it from the perspective of the teacher running it, in terms of like the reasoning behind it or the purpose. There wasn't more political intrigue and double crosses and larger statements that show like the world at large. It was mostly just saying like this is happening over here in seclusion on this island, and there weren't video feeds that they were watching. They just had the monitors on, or the collars on people and the microphones, so they could tell when people died, and they could kill anybody if anything got out of hand.
It was, the film's built up and stripped down as much as it needs to be. I think it is like well shaped as far as striking that balance. You know what I mean? Of not going too big and not being too small. Like this really, I think, well crafted film based on the premise.
No, it is.
The premise really could not have been executed that much better, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean there are sequels to it, or at least one sequel that we have not watched, but this movie, in terms of the concept it presented, it did it without holding anything back. It showed full on like kids, murdering kids in very brutal, gory ways. And luckily it didn't delve into like torture porn. And they didn't delve into rape. Like there was one character that said something along the lines of like, oh, like I'll rape you if I have to, so we won't both be virgins or something. But that doesn't actually happen.
Yeah, or they're threatening Go-Go, just like she was, wasn't she threatened in Kill Bill also? Yeah. Like there's almost a parallel between her situation, because I think she stabs a guy in the crotch.
Yeah,
the person plays Go-Go, just like Kill Bill. Like
Kill Bill,
those businessmen that are.
Well, in Kill Bill, she's more. No, I think it's like the guy that's missing his teeth, and she kind of coaxes him into something, and then she guts him and kills him.
Yeah.
So you luckily you avoid like. Because it has a lot of gore. So early 2000s, not too long after that, you had Saw and Hostel and stuff. A few years later in the U.S.
Yeah.
But this to me felt more like your 70s type action film gore than exploitative, grungy.
I mean, it is from the Japanese lineage of their cinema.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The way stuff was, way gore was sometimes presented over there in a lot of those films.
Well, so it's kind of like the Commando, where Arnold Schwarzenegger cuts a dude's arm off with the machete and then throws a pipe through a guy's head, where it's like exploitive, and it's not like showing brain matter and like it wouldn't.
Well, you have like the nice like throat. You have like the blood spray of the throat,
Bill, obviously,
and then you have all the gun violence. And then you do have some like bladed violence, like throat slittings and stuff. So, you know, like the movie moves along, like there is a little bit of downtime as you kind of get things set in place. But something I did like about this movie, and it's just inherent to movies that are subtitled, is it does require you to keep your eyes on screen. You can't really drift away and watch your phone or look at other stuff. You really have to focus what's going on. And
this movie feels less dated than Mom and Dad does too.
Let's see. And the movie was an hour and 54 minutes. Like I said, there was a few parts where it felt a little bit slower, but in general, it did not feel, you didn't really feel that runtime as much as you do in some other things. Because to me, just sitting there watching it without looking at how much time has passed, to me, it didn't really feel that much longer than that recent movie Mom and Dad that we talked about.
Yeah, which is shorter.
It just moved along at a good clip, and there were points where like 5 people would die in one sequence.
Yeah,
and it gave you the counter that showed you how many were dead, which I thought was like an interesting touch. And yeah, so just overall, I think that it was something that set in place like, okay, you can go there in terms of violence with children. You know, even if there are real world things going on of like kids killing kids in school shootings or like goofy YouTube challenges or just things that are very sad in real life, like media reflects real life, and having something like this shows you that it's not that far off from something like that, you know, actually happening. Like you could imagine, you know, if society continues to devolve entertainment wise and, you know, moral and ethics, like you could see a YouTube video or a YouTube Red series that is the Battle Royale in, you know, 15, 20, 30 years. I'm not saying that's really going to happen, but you could see the desire for that type of content.
Yeah.
And
well, it's a different take on the Purge almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
It's weird, like deconstruction of society and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and too, like I said, the Battle Royale doesn't seem to have like super huge political undertones. It's more of just a visceral experience.
Yeah, that's I think too what makes it a little bit.
And it streamlines it and keeps it more focused.
It's very streamlined. It's not the Super Bowl of.
And two, like
stuff.
it could work perfectly as like an anime too, I would assume, and or manga or whatever. I think there was a manga of it as well.
I thought about too. You know, now I'm like, okay, well, my nieces, when should I show this to them? Because I bet if I showed this to them when they were like 15 or 16, would this scare kids? You know what I mean? Like, this seems like a good scared straight movie of kids in high school. And it almost feels like it was in part way designed by that, or some frustrations of like, you know, he was 70. Maybe he was like, damn kids these days, and then wrote a film around that. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like that.
Well, like when you read stories locally about like a bus driver being attacked by students on it and stuff, you're like, you know, kids do get out of control. And
that's where the only thing that can make this movie better is if you put Nicolas Cage as the teacher and just had him go.
Beat Takashi. He is.
He's very
Which
good.
I had watched a lot of films with him before I watched this the first time, and I was like, he was actually one of the reasons why I was seeking it out. But his stuff is stellar. Like he's director. He did Zatoichi, I think a couple years later, like right before Kill Bill. I think it came to America afterwards, or maybe he did a remake of that where he directed it and he plays Zatoichi, and it's stellar. Like he's really, really awesome.
So I guess we can give our scores on this and start to wrap up this discussion. So I guess, Derek, I'll start with you in this one. If you had to give a score out of 10, where would you let this one land?
I really enjoyed it. The only reason why I even watched this movie originally was after I watched and read The Hunger Games. Like, okay, I went and read a little bit. It's like, this is essentially what inspired it, and went and watched it. And, you know, like, as a sit-down experience, I enjoyed it much more.
Yeah.
It's really gory.
Well, it's a more mature film. The Hunger Games
definitely
got more
mature. Well, it got kidified when it went to the movie. Not that the book wasn't either. But this one is definitely kind of like... You know, this is what it is. They did what they wanted to do, and I've never read the source material, but I give it 8 out of 10. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's not, like I said, maybe because I hadn't watched it in so long. Because like the last time I watched it probably been like 6 years ago or something, and so when I watched it this time, it'd been so long, and I watched it recording, so it was pretty fun, man. It didn't really get boring. Like I said, I think too having subtitles on there does keep you more actively engaged.
Well, force you to keep your eyes on the screen.
And like I'm one of those people, like movies that are in foreign languages subtitled do not bother me. I know that bothers some people.
Yeah.
But like I've watched a lot of those over the years, so it's something that I'm used to. It doesn't bother me or anything. So I gotta give it 8 out of 10. I think it's really solid. It's really enjoyable, and I'd like that. Like you all said earlier, the gore. It's really gory, but it's not
It's stylized.
It's stylized.
Yeah.
It's not because I hate Saw.
It's not. You're not going to see somebody vomiting in the theater because of it.
No, but that's what I liked about it. You know, I really enjoyed it.
So Sean,
I was thinking 8 out of 10 as well for me. Like I really like this film. Like I said, I think the middle could have been a little bit stronger. And that's really only in comparison to how strong this film starts. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not like its middle is bad at all. My reaction first time I watched it, I fell off and I never went back to it because I thought, okay, I've saw a lot of the setup and then it's kind of, I don't want to say it's running around in circles, but you know, you are kind of seeing some of the same stuff. It's just, you're seeing this cast of characters get picked off.
Yeah.
And this time too, I had, you know, just started to like, okay, I think I had paused it because I had to break up my viewings and it took me like, I watched something in between it just because I was like, okay, I've watched up to the point where I've seen it before and now I need to get back to this, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it's really well done and like supremely executed. And I really want to see the sequel. Apparently the director died after only shooting like 2 scenes of that and his son finished it off.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in checking that out.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking the exact same thing in terms of the score in 8 because
lucky number 8.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable film. I think it's an important film for, you know, kind of pushing along like certain story concepts and kind of, you know, pushing along like a certain type of storytelling that you then saw replicated in the U.S. with Hunger Games. Whether or not it was directly pulled from that material, that movie definitely set the ground for that to exist in the future. And, you know, well executed. I think when you watch it, it holds up well. There's nothing in it that really dates it. There's no bad CG. You have practical effects. I mean, I think all of it holds up on those regards. You know, the performances are all good. And I think the ultimate thing to me is like, it puts you in the place of thinking about what you would do in that situation, you know, at that age. And I think especially people who are closer to that age range, then it probably has even more relevance because you think specifically about, you're not thinking about, this person I was friends with 12 years ago. They're thinking about this person I'm friends with now, like what happened. So I think on that element alone, that the story idea is very gripping and the execution of it, you know, was over the top enough that it didn't make it too disturbing.
Yeah.
And it was just entertaining. There's a little bit of a lull in there, but at the same time, like giving you some downtime with the characters also helps, you know, just kind of cleanse the palate a little bit before you get into kind of like frenzied, you know, action happening. But yeah, so I think it just gets an 8 out of 10 average from HBTVS. So if you're listening via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review that helps other people find the podcast. You can find all the stuff we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. You can find links there to follow us on social media everywhere that we're at. So make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram at HBTVS_official. That's the same on Twitter, and follow us on YouTube as well. So you can see all the videos and short films and everything we're putting out. So you can find all of the links to everything at housebyvideostore.com. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at William Caps.
You can find me at MetaWorld Derek.
I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
Yep, so that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.